Lamar Jackson looks like the MVP once again, but until he does it in the playoffs, I'm not impressed. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today as I am every Tuesday by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's show, I'm going to tell you why Browns fans should have booed Deshaun Watson even louder. I'm going to tell you why the Chargers are misusing Justin Herbert and why I'm not all that impressed by Lamar Jackson's performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Before we get into it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here at the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Look, Lauren, Lamar Jackson looked absolutely incredible. He had 5 touchdown passes, only had 5 incompletions. Classic Lamar Jackson performance. But we've seen this before, and I don't know if he doesn't do it in the playoffs, then it's just the same old to me.
Yeah, I mean, when that same old's MVP, though, Ravens fans certainly aren't complaining there. Like, he does need to do it in the playoffs, but we could talk more later about the surrounding supporting cast and whether that's an excuse or a valid explanation for their shortcomings.
100%. But my guy Kevin Oestreicher from Locked On Ravens broke down the huge win for the Ravens on Monday Night Football.
The Baltimore Ravens get a statement win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 7. I'm Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. 41-31, the final score appearing a lot closer than the game actually was. Lamar Jackson continues his domination tour and is making a very strong case for his MV3, third MVP, 5 total touchdowns for Lamar Jackson in this game passing. And man, he was on it in this one. Rashad Bateman had a huge day. Mark Andrews with 2 touchdowns. Defensively, they didn't finish the way they wanted to, and that's why the game was closer than it appeared. But again, the Ravens make a statement and again establish themselves as a top contender in the NFL. For more on the Ravens and their Week 7 win, be sure to check out the Locked On Ravens podcast and subscribe on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network.
I mean, look, the Ravens are going to go to the playoffs. The Ravens are going to be an excellent team. Lamar will likely win MVP, but we've seen all that before. Lauren, this is what I would compare it to. It's James Harden in the NBA, Joel Embiid in the NBA. These guys just tear through the league in the regular season, and then they get to the playoffs, and it's just not quite as good as it looks in the regular season. Lamar right now has as many playoff wins, too, as he does MVPs. So, to me, it's just like, we've seen this before. It's very impressive. Lamar is a fantastic player, but I guess I'm just like, show me in the playoffs. I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends. And until he does that, I guess I'm just like, all right, great job. But what now?
I'll give you the Joel Embiid comparison mainly because of the injury theme there. That Lamar won a playoff game this past season, but prior to that, he hadn't been a playoff participant in 2022 or 2021. It had been 2 years off with Tyler Huntley being their option there. He played okay in some of those games, but like we think about the MVP most valuable, you've seen the Ravens completely fall off when Lamar is not out there because he's been the engine that even gets them to have these playoff opportunities. And then be nice if they could just give him a little something else so it doesn't have to be all him all the time throughout the postseason.
Well, I think that little something else might just be Derrick Henry, who is on pace for 2,000 rushing yards once again. And Derrick Henry may be that thing that puts the Ravens over the top. I'm not so sure about that when you get into the playoffs, but it certainly could be there. The question becomes, why didn't the Ravens pucker up and trade for Derrick Henry last year if he was going to make this big of a difference? They had those conversations with the Titans, but I agree with you. If he can get there, he's got a supporting cast that may be able to put him over the top this year. I'll believe it when I see it. That's all. But moving over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers side of things, a bigger loss than just on the scoreboard for Tampa Bay. Mike Evans goes out after dropping a touchdown pass, after scoring his 100th touchdown catch of his career with a hamstring injury, and it looked kind of bad. And then to make matters even worse, down by 10 with less than a minute left in the game, Chris Godwin suffers a devastating injury. Looks like a dislocated ankle. And I mean, don't go back and watch it if you haven't seen it, folks. It is certainly gruesome. Odds are that he's out for the rest of the season. Besides the injuries there, I just can't trust Baker Mayfield whatsoever. And my guy James Yarko from Locked On Bucks talked about why this loss is bigger than just the scoreboard.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose in more ways than one on Monday night. I am James Yarko from Locked On Bucks talking about the Buccaneers 41-31 loss to the Baltimore Ravens, but that is simply a side note. The Buccaneers lost Mike Evans early in the game on a pass to the end zone that Evans dropped and was writhing in pain in the end zone, suffering a re-aggravation of that hamstring injury. No word yet on how severe that is. So his status for Sunday's game against the Falcons was already in doubt. Then with 43 seconds left in the game, a game that was already decided and the starters were still in, Chris Godwin suffers a severe leg injury, was carted off the field in an air cast in what was at that point a meaningless game. This could have major ramifications on the Buccaneers season moving forward for a team that was going to be able to put themselves in first place in the NFC South with a win over Atlanta next week. Now it looks like they are going to be without both of their top receivers, with Chris Godwin likely being out for the rest of the year. For more on this and all things Buccaneers, check out the Locked On Bucks podcast 5 days a week here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Man, poor James. You could tell he's frustrated, and any Buccaneers fan should be. Why do you have Chris Godwin out there at the end of that game? But more importantly, I mean, besides the injuries, like I was saying, you can't trust Baker Mayfield. He threw some terrible throws in this game. The interception in the end zone. You go back to the 3 interceptions he had in the second quarter against the Saints the week before, which didn't matter because the Saints are such a bad football team right now. Like, at the end of the day, you can't trust Baker Mayfield. His attitude and his bravado makes people think he's an above average quarterback, but he's just an average quarterback who plays too aggressively for his own good. The Buccaneers aren't contenders. They never were, even before the injuries. So I'm just like, it sucks for Godwin in a contract year, but for the Bucs perspective, I never really trusted them anyways.
It's crazy they could go from first place in the division to not a playoff team because of those 2 injuries. But, I've changed my mind on the Chris Godwin thing even since the end of the game, because at first I was kind of feeling like, well, when you're only down 10, yes, the game's over, but you're not going to see teams quit only down 10. So a player could get injured on any of those plays. And okay, it was kind of a fluky thing. But I came back around because looking at the rules, you're only allowed 2 onside kicks per game under the new kickoff rules. You cannot attempt a third onside kick. And the Buccaneers had already attempted 2 onside kicks prior to the injury. So even if they had scored at that point, they couldn't have tried another onside kick to even attempt to come back in the game. So there was literally like no chance they had of coming back. And that's where I'm like, well, okay, maybe knowing that with a little hindsight there, that game was definitely over. Not even a sliver of a chance of onside kicking and getting it back.
Man, I mean, with the new rules and everything like that, it's understandable that there's some confusion. Like, it's hard to find concrete rules for how things work. So it makes sense that there are situations where certain head coaches, most head coaches, maybe don't even understand exactly what it is. Now, you could argue that maybe they should, but I guess it's understandable with something this new and something this strange that there is some confusion in what's going on. But a devastating night for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I really think that this kind of puts them in a spot where they are not going to be a playoff team. I think that you acknowledging that that's a possibility, I think that's what it's going to be. But there was another Monday Night Football game, maybe not quite as entertaining as Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry going nuts, but the Arizona Cardinals step up, and Justin Herbert is just being used in such a poor way by these dinosaurs on the Chargers coaching staff. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, yes, I'm talking to you, NFL fans. You can start the second quarter of the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go on FanDuel, check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place that you place your wagers. It's on the same exact page because FanDuel is an all-encompassing hub of football information. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And if you listened to the show yesterday, I told you to put that money on Ravens -3.5. But don't worry, we'll have another FanDuel Friday this week, and I'll tell you exactly how you can make some money. Make sure that you go to America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Lauren, let's move to the second Monday Night Football game. The Arizona Cardinals beat the Los Angeles Chargers, and it goes down to the wire. Absolutely down to the wire. And my guy Dan from Locked On Chargers breaks down the defeat for the Los Angeles team.
The Chargers played their ugliest game under Jim Harbaugh yet, and their missed opportunities came back to bite them in a brutal loss. This is Daniel Wade here from Locked On Chargers, coming to you after the 17-15 loss to the Cardinals in primetime in a game where the Chargers offense just simply didn't do enough. They had to settle for 5 field goals in a game where Justin Herbert threw for 349 yards with a banged-up group of skill position players. Something has to change offensively. The Chargers have now gone 15 straight drives without a touchdown, going back to the last game against the Denver Broncos, and have only scored 1 second-half touchdown since week 1. It's been brutal to watch, and missed opportunities were the name of the game, and we should have known it was going this way when Jalen Reagor fumbled inside the 5-yard line after a 41-yard pass from Justin Herbert, and the Chargers never got close to scoring a touchdown again. This one falls squarely on the offense, and something has to change. But for more on the Chargers, make sure to follow the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Look, Justin Herbert may have thrown for a lot of yards in this game, but at the end of the day, the Chargers did not surround him with weapons. Will Dissly was his #1 weapon on the night. The Chargers purposefully neglected their skill position players. They don't have anybody who can go make that play. They're relying on a bunch of mediocre guys, and you need somebody who can win on the outside or win in the middle of the field and make a huge play for your quarterback. Justin Herbert is simply too talented to have Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator. At the end of the day, Greg Roman is not a modern offensive coordinator. He should not be an offensive coordinator in the NFL right now. And I just feel bad that Justin Herbert has so much talent, and he's going to have to continue to hear people say that he's not good enough. And all. I mean, they got to the red zone 1 time. It's just inconceivable to me that the Chargers have, and they did it on purpose. It's like this was the plan from Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, he threw for a lot of yards now, but they have been playing this, we're going to run the ball down your throat, 1980s style football, rely on the defense. Like, this is the plan for the Chargers to minimize their great quarterback. It's like the meme where you have the Lamborghini in the driveway next to the trailer. Like, and I would go even further. When you take that Lamborghini out on the highway, now you have Greg Roman driving it, and he's driving 10 miles per hour under the speed limit. It just doesn't make any sense what their plan is right now. And look, they're a physical team. They're going to play better football. They're going to be on the bubble and all the graphics. I truly believe that. But to me, it's just malpractice that this was the plan of how they wanted to handle Justin Herbert.
Well, that's the thing. They're not even executing that plan well.
Right.
Like, it'd be one thing if if they were actually running the ball well and then it still wasn't working. But in this game against Arizona, right, J.K. Dobbins gets under 3 yards per carry. They end up abandoning the running game pretty well, despite it being close to the very end and the Chargers having a lead, for a lot of that game as well. And, the whole point was build up the offensive line, and Herbert's under pressure on like 30% of his dropbacks. He's sacked 3 times as well. Like, they're not even doing the thing they're supposed to be good at well. So then, how can you expect that to work when they can't even do it that way? So then they're forced to go to the passing game that was never part of their plan. They don't have the weapons for, so that doesn't work either.
Yeah, it's blowing my mind looking at the way the game played out. The Chargers are supposed to be this well-coached, smart football team with Jim Harbaugh. And they lost the penalty battle. They lost the turnover battle. They lost the red zone battle. They lost the rushing battle. They lost the sack battle. Where is the Jim Harbaugh effect that we're all expecting there? It's just simply not there.
Because at the end of the day, they're still the Los Angeles Chargers.
Right. They cannot escape. But we do want to give credit to the winning team. The Cardinals win 17-15. And Lauren, the Cardinals are building something. I don't know if it's this year, but my guy Alex Clancy, very excited about a crazy game.
What was that? What was that? The Arizona Cardinals get a weird and miraculous win at home on Monday night in Week 7 against the Chargers to move to 3-4 in the season, to pretty much save their season. That game had everything. It was interception to a fumble recovery by the team who threw the interception, to the Chargers having almost 400 total yards and not scoring a touchdown on a faceless Arizona Cardinals defense. We're starting to see the emergence of young corners like Garrett Williams and Max Melton showing their stripes at the NFL level. We had Jalen Reagor, the victim of a peanut punch by Starling Thomas that saved the touchdown, with the immaculate bounce that went right into safety Jalen Thompson's hands in the end zone that gave the Cardinals the ball. What are we doing here? Some of the worst coaching I've seen so far this year. Kyler Murray marches them down to win the game at the end of the game. All that and more. Locked on Cardinals, your team every day.
I mean, you could feel the momentum. All right. Jonathan Gannon, the defense outplayed the Chargers defense, so he's getting that defense good. There's still question marks on the offense. Look, I think the Cardinals are going to be a competitive football team. I said this a couple of weeks ago here on the show. I don't think they're a playoff team this year, but they're a team that I think in the offseason, a lot of people are going to be saying, I think the Cardinals can be contenders this year and make the playoffs. Like, they're one offseason away from being a really, really good football team.
In the meantime, they're just one of those volatile teams that you feel like any given week they could have a great game and beat a good team, or they could have a terrible game and lose to a bad team. And that's usually the sign of like a young ascending team, right? That they're still going through those growing pains and figuring out how to play good, consistent football for 4 quarters. But when you get like 3 quarters of good Cardinals play, which we didn't even get in this game, they could beat the 49ers. They could beat the Rams impressively. They can be close with teams like the Detroit Lions early in the season. Then they'll also put up really big stinkers too, where like at any given week, they play the Dolphins next week. I mean, who knows? They could smoke the Dolphins, or the Dolphins could have some big comeback against the Cardinals, because the Cardinals just aren't, if anything, they're just consistently inconsistent at this point, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah, they can go toe-to-toe with Buffalo in Buffalo and lose by 1 score. Or they can lose to the Commanders 31-7 or what it happened to be at home. Like, it can literally go either way, but they have some talent on that team. They're starting to piece it together. I think they need more talent on the defensive side of the ball for certain, but they're an exciting ascending team. I think they're not like a true stinker to watch. And I think that's what's most important for Cardinals fans right now, who have gone through it after, Steve Keim and all of the different, and Cliff Kingsbury's first run as head coach, all of that. They deserve this. But speaking of deserving it, go ahead, Lauren. Cause I mean, I'm ready to talk around.
They're hard to trust. Like you say they're ascending and it's like you want to believe, but we've seen the Cardinals for so many years not be when they look like they're turning a corner with Kyler Murray, and then they hit a wall, and it's not quite the turner corner. So I still find myself like, I need to see it more to believe it, but I see the positive direction.
Yeah, they're going to have to finish strong to make people believe, kind of like what I was talking about earlier in the offseason conversation. But speaking of deserving it, there's been a lot of discourse about Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns fans booing, and I'm here to tell you that they should have booed louder. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, period. Why? Because they have the best features in the industry. And now they have a new feature that makes Game Time even better called Game Time Picks. Game Time Picks makes getting tickets for your favorite events and seeing your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, they still have the panoramic view from your seat so you know what you're going to be looking at when you sit down. You can toggle on the feature in the app and get all-in pricing so you know exactly what you're going to pay for your tickets before you check out. Make sure that you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, Lauren, we're going to cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked both the Monday Night Football games and our reactions coming out of that. But now I got to get to some more stories coming out of Sunday, starting with Deshaun Watson tearing his Achilles. The discourse here, Lauren, for me has been a little disappointing. The fans booed when Deshaun Watson got hurt. Okay. But what's been most disappointing for me is the amount of people who have come out and tried to shun the fans and turn Deshaun Watson into some sort of victim. I'm just going to throw it out there. Let's not hide from the elephant in the room. 23 sexual assault or misconduct cases that have been settled. He was not acquitted on those cases. There is a new charge that is open right now. I understand that in today's society, people of wealth and privilege can be attacked, and, that happens. But 23 different cases, Lauren. I'm sorry, I was born in the day, but I wasn't born yesterday. And there's no way that all of that is lies and nonsense. Look, Deshaun Watson is not a good person. Deshaun Watson is a guy who is not a model citizen like his teammate Myles Garrett tried to call him. By the way, Myles Garrett, a guy who took someone's helmet and swung it at someone's head during a football game. Maybe he's not the best person to follow the moral compass on. You got celebrities coming out trying to say that the fans are, those people should have booed louder. Deshaun Watson is not a good person. Deshaun Watson deserves to be booed. And I don't care what people think about what I have to say here, but what happened to Deshaun Watson is karma. His NFL career going in the tank, him being unable to replicate his top 5 quarterback play at times in Houston is directly a result of you get what you deserve. So not only should the Browns fans booed Deshaun Watson and booed the organization for selling their soul to the devil, they should have booed louder. And I think it's pathetic that so many people want to get online and turn Deshaun Watson into some sort of victim when the people who really have been victimized were victimized by Deshaun Watson himself.
I think the problem with Browns fans in this situation is that they should have booed earlier, right? That they waited until it was convenient that he's injured and bad. So that's the time they're going to be upset about the allegations, about the cases, about the quarterback himself, like everything about it. Like, it's very convenient to come out and bring the boos now when he's already going to be out for the rest of the season. So, okay, well, now let's jump on the anti-Deshaun Watson train here when there was a lot of time where Browns fans were glorifying things that Deshaun Watson had done. People were joking about it with signs in tailgates, and they were dressing up with stuff. And there was a lot of really gross things that Browns fans were doing to defend Deshaun Watson throughout this process. But all of a sudden, he's a bad quarterback and he gets hurt, and it's really easy to jump on the train of hating Deshaun Watson. Where it's like, where was that energy when he wasn't suffering an injury? He's deserved it the whole time, but now it's very convenient to just join in on the well-deserved parade of criticism for Deshaun Watson.
Now the question becomes, what was the percentage there? Because I'm certain that there were Browns fans that
Sure.
did not want Watson, that felt this way about Watson the entire time. You know, one of the biggest Browns fans online, Mark Sessler from the Heed the Call podcast, you know, he's been very open about his disdain for Deshaun Watson. I'm sure that there are Browns fans, a large portion of Browns fans, who are not on board for this, but you are 100% right. There's a lot of fickle people who supported him until it was obvious that he couldn't help their football team, and then they turned on him. So that's a completely fair point as well.
The question I kept finding myself is like, okay, when he gets injured, should you boo or cheer? Because like, if you know, are you cheering that if you're cheering, like you're happy that he's out of the game, which is what you wanted, right? So when you're booing, like you're booing Deshaun Watson, the person, but you should be cheering that he's no longer your quarterback. So I was kind of torn on that too. Like what should be the appropriate response there? Because I think a combination of the two feels like each one feels right in their own way.
Yeah, that makes it very difficult to pick which way you want to go. I agree with you there. It's definitely a confusing situation, but I'm going to talk more Cleveland Browns on tomorrow's episode. Where do they go from here? Do they go to DTR if he's healthy? Do they go to Jameis Winston? Can the Browns dig themselves out of this hole? Also going to talk some Tua as well, a guy who, you know, a lot of people are telling him how he should operate with his career, so can't wait to dive into that. But that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, the Madman, for my excellent co-host, Lauren Cox. As I tell you guys every single episode, stay safe out there.